Uh, Hi everyone. Welcome to this breakout session. About extraction of water ice from regolith research, including separation, purification, electrolysis, and liquefaction. So, I'm Suman. I'm the deputy leadership scientist at NASA GRC, and Tyler here is helping me uh, with the note taking. Um, so so there are two breakout sessions, and this breakout session is for 1 hour. The second session will be available for both the current attendees and those who have missed the first one. So when you are signing in, please sign in with your full name so that we can see the full name of the attendee, and we can actually make a note of who said what, and we can compile the report. And please mute your mic unless you are speaking. If there is an issue with the bandwidth, please turn off your camera. And like there is a over, if you look into the Microsoft Teams, you will see that there is this raised hand. Right now, we are very few people. Like as we start getting into more people into this audience, please raise your hand, and then we can get to start speaking. And the overall goal is to obtain science community input on priority lunar physical science, technology, and capability needs, and collaboration. And there are three objectives. So the first one is, what are the top priority physical sciences knowledge gaps and research topics that must be conducted on the moon or in lunar orbit in order of priority to enable sustained lunar habitation and future Mars missions? And which of them you think that they can be initiated in the near term within 5 to 10 years? The second one is, what meaningful science we can conduct on Moon given its unique environment of reduced gravity, vacuum, temperature, radiation, etc. And the third one is, what are the key technologies or technical capabilities and resources that we need to conduct the physical sciences research on the Gateway and Moon? So for an example, like the CLIPS lander, Artemis vehicle, lunar base camp, etc. So maybe we can start with the first one, which is, what are the top priority physical sciences knowledge gaps and research topics that must be conducted on the moon or in cislunar orbit to enable sustained lunar habitation and future Mars mission? And which of these do you think they need to be initiated in the near term? Let me go out of the full screen because I cannot see who is going to speak or what. So give me a second. So at least in this way, I can see who is. Give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Right. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay. Okay. I just have to move it around a little bit. Okay. So given this first question, so anybody wants to go ahead? You don't have to raise hand now. You can just start speaking because we have few people here now.
Hey, Suman, just a clarification question. This is Tyler. Is this one related to just lunar dust, or are you asking more broadly where are the gaps?
So this one is with regard to the topic is about extraction of water ice from regolith research, including separation, purification, and electrolysis and liquefaction. So I think with regard to the lunar dust, there is another separate session that is going on. Am I correct, Kevin?
Yeah. My bad. I meant the water ice. Are you asking specifically regarding the water ice?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Can you click back to the question? Okay.
So Ron? think we have Ron Krill. If you're speaking, you're mute.
I could start us off.
Please.
So, yeah, just my first stab at it. I feel like the biggest gap is that we really haven't been able to do much of that research yet. We're kind of limited being in a terrestrial environment, and the 1/6 lunar G is pretty hard to replicate. I mean, I know it's been done for specific experiments, but having, like, let's say an entire room where you have that level of gravity, that's pretty tough. Or something larger like this water ice extraction process. To do that, I mean, you need a fair bit of equipment and things to get like a real tech demo going. I'm sure you can do smaller experiments, but I think a big gap I'd like to bring up would be the lack of a available facility or available space where you can do some of these larger, machining and extraction type processes. And I'm not sure the best way to address that. I mean, would it be, just use what you have and focus on some of the smaller experiments and kind of build up the capability piecewise until you get there, or is it something that we'll kind of need to put on hold for now until we actually get boots on the moon and can start really bringing equipment there? Is that something we'll need to wait for the full scale? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Tyler. I mean, if I can add to that, I guess just at the beginning of this, when me and Kevin, we were just kind of talking, something that he mentioned is, and I was listening to today morning the talk of the Viper talk, and they were mentioning is about like how it is not very clear, if I'm not terribly mistaken, that's what they said, is how it's not very clear, like exactly how much of water in the form of ice is there and which place. Right? Am I saying it right? And if that is the case, then how do we extract that? So essentially, it's a two-way problem. So one of it, which you said, is lack of available facility, and I also think that there is also a lack of knowledge of where we have. So Ali.
Yeah, I was just taking notes. But yeah, I mean that's kind of hard to replicate as well. I think it was Ron who mentioned it. Looks like he might have stepped out, but he just gave a talk a few minutes ago and just mentioned about how it's really hard to simulate that or know how bad it's going to be, at least regarding dust, until you actually get there. And yeah, I mean, I know we have some moon rocks and things, but as far as I know, they didn't have any ice in them. But that's something we really can't really know for sure until we get there. And I think you can do analysis from satellite flybys and whatnot, but it's one thing to theorize and guess what it might be and use data to find it, but it's a whole nother to actually go there and, and try and do it, on the moon. So. Yeah, I'm not sure how to address it, but just physically doing the process, whether it's a tech demo or they actually try and reuse it, I think that is the biggest hurdle. Just saying, yes, we did it. Now let's, look at how much we got, what we can use it for, how clean it is, etc.
So Kevin.
Yeah, so one of the things that you can think about is are the activities of the Viper right now, because it's clearly going to go into permanently shallow region or areas that they're expecting to find ice or water remnants. And so I believe they're looking for PIs right now to support the studies. But that's something you might want to think about is with the work that Viper is doing, where it's looking at water, seeing what's being brought up, and looking at the water content, at least from a spec perspective, that could probably start to provide you with some initial indications for how deep the water is, whether it's, it is ice in dirt or frozen dirt, that kind of idea. So, that would be probably a way to start doing the work. Also, maybe what you might be able to do is think about CLIPS studies that are going to permanently shadowed regions, or using things like Viper, or developing equipment or rovers that will actually go to places that physical sciences is interested in, to kind of study what's there, in order to kind of help with, all right, if we know it's there and we know it's in what content and how far you got to go down to get it, then that might help to guide the type of mechanisms and procedures you'll need to do the extraction work.
So it's a little chicken and egg problem, right, Kevin? What I mean by that is, essentially, on one hand, you want to know how the water needs to be extracted, but then you also do not know how it is, where it is, type deal, right?
Yes. Yeah, so I think it's a combination of the two, and working with the tech guys and geologists to kind of do those studies. So you may want to think about opening conversations up with Tony, because he and his group at Ames have been doing quite a lot of work on finding the water and doing a lot of studies on that end. So and that could potentially help you start the work. Maybe there's also other things you could think about doing in Antarctica, or more drier regions like Atacama, and doing some field studies out there with water and extractions to do some proof of concept before going out.
So, but in that regard, also, how do we initiate those conversations? What I mean by that is, for an example, like I can tell from the viewpoint of, because I think that is also, it's not a physical knowledge gap, but it's on the viewpoint of the research topic, is when we try to do any research, it's pretty much like focused on the fundamental science on one side, which is pretty much, how should I say it? Which is, I'm just making up an example. Let's say I want to see how the rheology of water and some sand particle in lunar gravity is going to do. However, that may not be super relevant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I guess what it just comes down to a certain extent, is doing the literature research and the talk to figure out what's relevant and what's necessary. And I think it's easy enough to get in contact with a lot of the scientists who are doing potentially areas that can help guide you in your studies. And I think the folks here at this meeting were there, and we can always put you in contact with scientists over on the planetary lunar side, who can also help you with those sorts of discussions, and kind of figure out, what don't you know that you need to find out to be able to determine what's going to be useful and what won't be useful, and and in your approaches.
Okay.
And so we can always help you. We can always help you out on that end to find the people to talk to.
Yeah, no, I guess my question is like, on top of that, how do we, when we are doing, let's say, this NRAs or things like those, how do we make sure like there is a interdepartmental activity? What I mean by that, so like researchers from different fields, they collaborate on that side, because on one side it's a pretty much a applied physics problem, but on the other side, it's a the geophysics problem also, as you rightly mentioned, or sometimes it's like satellite imaging coupled with that. So,
Yeah.
So anyway, so I think that is one of the things that we need to also somehow you get to. So anything else that you think there is a knowledge gap or research topics you guys feel? Radita? Okay, I don't know who is here. Maybe we can go to the next one. If somebody comes in, we can join back in. So I guess the second part of the thing was that at how what meaningful science we think can be conducted on Moon given its unique environment of reduced gravity, vacuum and temperature, radiation, etc. I'll go first. So when I was hearing this throughout all the topics, so it seems like rheology is going to be quite an important thing. And I think Matthias from DLR, he actually mentioned one thing, which I kind of agree, which is when you think about the rheological models, they are pretty much phenomenological, meaning they are not derived from the first law of physics. And as a result of that, there is a chance that they may work in Earth, but they may not work in lower gravity or like in a lunar or a Martian environment. So I think that is going to be an important thing because if you are going to extract, you have to somehow deal with all the impure form of water, meaning however water is mixed with regolith or like sand, dust, and all those things, or in form of rock and something like that. So I think that is one of the meaningful signs in my mind, rheology. Any more take?
Yeah, so something I brought up yesterday, I think in this meeting or the other session, was that, you know, it is a unique environment. We have reduced gravity, vacuum, temperature, radiation, everything you listed there. So you kind of need these multidisciplinary teams that can look at maybe not all of those areas, but at least a couple. So like what you mentioned earlier about, you know, combining it with the geology and the geophysics type work, that might be a good approach for this stuff moving forward, whether it's for some of the CLIPS programs or Viper or anything like that, where you have kind of these cross-disciplinary teams that can hopefully give you a good solution. You know, whatever the research is, you might need, you know, a fluid physicist to look at some of the fluidic properties of the ice, a geologist to help with the actual drilling or extraction itself, and then maybe someone to help map out locations to find it. But yeah, I think multidisciplinary teams are probably something we really should strive to reach for anyone who's thinking about proposing or sees an NRA out there or anything like that. I think that's a really good approach.
Kevin?
Yeah, no, I would agree. That'd be a good way of getting started. But I think the other thing too to think about, and I think what some of this question is related to is what kind of science hardware are you going to need to use? You know, something that's small that might be able to do some studies initially, and then you know what are some of the larger pieces of equipment that you're going to need to actually do some testing, you know, out there. So you know, start with proof of concept or understanding the you know the physics behind everything, and then all the way out to actually extraction. So you know, some of the questions, because one of the things that's kind of important about this question. Now it's probably, I think, more related to the second question. Really is to say, okay, what kind of science do we want to be able to do there? And then the next question is, if we want to do that science, what exactly is it that we're going to need to be able to do that? So I jumped the gun a bit, but I think to me, obviously I'm a biologist to start with, but in listening to the talks and talking to Fran and quite a bit about these things, I think the meaningful science is really going to start with understanding what do we not know about the moon and what we're trying to do with water ice and where it's located. And then based on that, understanding what those gaps are is going to lead to thoughts related to the type of meaningful science that you will, that you need to conduct. I think that's probably what I just said is really, really obvious. So to me, thinking about what the meaningful science is one, where's the water? In what form is the water? How is it? What's it bound up to? And is there a water cycle on the moon or not, depending upon whether it's lit or not? And then also, are there any comparisons or analogs on Earth that one can use to kind of test some early hypotheses one might have related to the water, how it's bound and how it can be extracted, such as maybe in Antarctica or in Iceland or some of the other analog sites. And so you can kind of get a handle of what exactly it is you're trying to do and whether you can do that.
So if I rephrase that, Kevin, so it kind of boils down to the same thing, which is like the big gap and meaningful science. It boils down to is what Viper is trying to achieve, right? What I mean by that is what, where, and how water lives on moon, and how can we simulate that on Earth? Is that a succinct way of putting it?
It is. Looking for analog sites that you can actually do some testing on the Earth before you go to the moon, but also in parallel do studies and understand things like what Viper is doing and some of the other mapping studies are doing to figure out where your best locations are going to be to do your studies.
So just a curious question, Kevin, in that regard, is the data that Viper is going to get, is it going to be publicly available almost immediately?
I know it will be publicly available. It's going to be peer-reviewed research, so I don't know how quickly. I do know when they did the LADI, they put out a paper and they did quite a lot of work when they did L-Cross and the impactor. That took a while. It's like any science publication. But that would be a good question to talk to Tony Calaprete about. But yeah, my understanding it's going to be peer-reviewed science on the back end, so it could take a while until it's published. So I don't know if it's going to be a situation like Gene Lab where new data comes in and it's immediately going to be put onto a database and open for public analysis. That I don't know.
As the first initial start, will it depend our basic understanding of science? Will it indicate towards what the lunar resources are, or test out new architectures, that sort of thing, that humans could stay for an extended period of time and then do a lot of fundamental research. And mostly right now it's like what you call it, like a why we are here type of thing. So looking back to the earth, like how do we evolve and where we came from and such. Okay, will that be the start for this type of study?
Sorry, Padita, can you please repeat one more time? I kind of missed that.
It is like what type of science should we do on the moon that we cannot do on Earth? Is like it's a fundamental physics or any type of fundamental science. Okay, and then we look back into like and then applications like lunar resources. Okay, now we get to the access of lunar resources. Say like it's free. Okay, well, of course, it will take a huge amount of investment to get onto the moon and do such things. Okay, and then it comes up with like what type of architectures do we do, and the next step is like why are we there? Why do we go there? And then it's why can't we do this kind of study on Earth? Okay, say like so. Of course, that it's a different gravitation, different environment, different pressure, radiation, like everybody knows about it. So should we start with that kind of concept? And then like in terms of geology, and then towards the fundamental physics and environment. Yeah. Should we look into it as science for science sakes, or will there be some kind of things that we want to know that we don't know, but this will be of big benefit back to the earth? Yeah. Based on that, then we'll go to like, okay, what type of science? Now that we know, what type of instrumentation? Should it be a mobile lab, or like the one that we have it on the Mars right now? Because see, you look for water, you look for interesting thing. You cannot just stay there one mobile, so you have to travel extensively. So will there be a mobile type scientific research and instrumentation, or at the same time we'll have a base camp, big lab, where we can study different types of science, including biology or fundamental physics, and then these are interdisciplinary. Yeah. I just want to do what I wanted to do, does not benefits us, I think, in the end. So it should be some kind of like a collaborative approach when trying to resolve these kind of things. Thanks.
So I think, Padita, with regard to the water ice extraction process, are you saying with regard to that, or are you saying like with regard to general science?
In terms of general science that I am thinking about, okay, yeah, water extraction is one thing, okay, yeah, but how important is how will it impact our scientific venue? Um, will it benefit us? Okay.
Okay, will it be, yeah. So what type of science?
This is the topic that we're more interested in, like a water extraction and so on. But in general, that's what I'm saying. When uh, Kevin was discussing about the what you call it, different aspects of science that we can do in order to learn new type of fundamental physics, biology, and so on. Okay.
Hey, Padetha, I don't know if you've seen the James Cameron movie Avatar, but it kind of it reminds me of that. Because they're on this planet, and they're mining or something for I think it's called unobtainium, like some made up element that's very hard to obtain.
Oh.
But that was actually what financed, all of the space missions, all the facilities, all the people there. So I think looking more long term, it's probably going to be, what water ice can we extract there? That's probably one of the most useful resources up there. And then if there's any precious metals, heavy metals that we might like to obtain on the moon, and then I think even some of the asteroids nearby might have them as well. So I think that'll ultimately be where we go. just because it'll essentially help pay for itself and help continue this drive to build more of a culture up on the moon. And then, I guess I wasn't really around back then, at least working here, but, the early days of ISS during a lot of the construction of it, I believe from what I've heard, a lot of the focus back then was on the hardware and the technology and the equipment, getting that pushed along, raising the TRL, making sure it's ready to go into the ISS. And now that the station is kind of built, more or less, it allows us to focus more on that fundamental science and some of the pure research. So my guess, and again, this is only a guess, but I would guess that at least initially it would be on some of these things such as the water ice extraction and reuse and ISRU, where there's a direct impact that can open more doors and allow us to get more technology on the moon. And then once that's settled a little bit, we might see more of the original science. But at the same time, it's still fairly new. We haven't been to the moon in 50 years, so we're still trying to learn as much as we can to help develop the technology. So there's kind of a fine line there, but that's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, talking to Fran Caramonti, and also this was in how, as we were working on organizing the meeting and the topics, one of his main questions is that one can think of all sorts of different ways to extract water and to do this sort of work: separation, purification, electrolysis, liquefaction. However, his questions out there was, again, where's the water? What's it bound to? What state's it in? How do we change it? So a lot of the fundamental questions related to the water of the moon and on the moon itself. And then as we, as physical scientists and engineers, begin to think about, all right, how are we going to extract it, and what mechanisms, what procedures, what tools are we going to use? What is it about the extraction methods, the separation, purification, like fluid bed, particles and things that we don't know how they perform in 1/6 gravity, that we can't just say, let's use this piece of equipment and try to do the work, because we just don't know how it's going to function in a microgravity or in this case, a 1/6 gravity condition. So what fundamental work do we need to do in, say, fluidics, complex fluids flow, materials, and other areas that are going to that we're going to need to know in order to get something that actually works on the moon. And so that was his questions that he was having, because someone can always design something that will extract, but the question is will it work? Because we don't know enough about the basic fundamental physical sciences that are going to be necessary to actually accomplish what you guys want to set out, or what an engineer, say, wants to set out to do, right? So, for example, an example would be, well, in terms of combustion, right? They say, oh, we can do any kind of clothes, but then the question is, well, what do we not know about how a change in gravity and oxygen pressure in combination does to the actual flammability of a material, right? So studies need to be done on that. So that's kind of what the idea is. In this case, what we're being able to do, because Artemis and others have, on the HEO side has said science is a heavy user, and science utilization is why we're going to the moon. And so this gives the opportunity now to really ask some fundamental questions for knowledge sake as well as for application sake. And so those are kind of some of the questions that you would want to think about if you're thinking about how to do the extraction and the separation, purification, electrolysis, and liquefaction, and all those things that are in this set. Again, what do we know? What do we not know? And then in terms of the processes that we know may be used, what is it that we really don't know about when it comes under the lunar environment condition that we need to study from a fundamental or an R&D perspective? right? Because so now you're basically looking at the translation of fundamental to R&D to application, and fundamental physics or physical sciences will fall for what BPS does, falls within that early state knowledge that can then be translated to R&D. So
I will just add to that. So Padita, so maybe I guess within the realm of this water ice extraction, so maybe a fundamental science can be like flow of water through granular media under microgravity or like under lunar gravity. So that may be a fundamental science question. Correct?
I mean, this topic is very important in terms of our what you call our living creatures, not humans, but living creatures, is it? Because we being as in this what you call it organism, it's heavily based on water, and our survival is heavily based on water. Okay. And then at the same time, research has been proven that, there is about, is that right? 0.1% per mass, okay, of water is available. So extraction is very important also for our survival. And then the technology behind it. And then there are lots of what you call it like a spin-off that would come. And then once we have that kind of like a technology there, I mean, it opened a huge amount of doorway for studying many, many types of what you call a fundamental science, including geology, biology, and as well as, I mean, human beings has the urge, at this level of our intelligence is that where we come from, why we are here, what is next, that's how we survive and that's how we evolve, in terms of, the what you call it, like exploration and so on.
Okay. So maybe the last part of the question, I think this would be at 4:25 Eastern time, so 17 minutes. So the last question is, what are the key technologies, technical capabilities, and resource that we need to conduct physical sciences research on the Gateway and the Moon? For an example, the CLIPS lander, the Artemis vehicle, lunar base camp. So I'll go first. So looking at the trouble of dust, which I never thought it's that big of a trouble. My ignorance. So I think we need a lot more automated system, meaning labs almost like in the format of ready to use box type thing, which can do a lot more of the physical sciences experiment that we can either control from here or which will be AI powered.
I can second to that because I don't think we being as exposed to such our lovely Mother Earth. Let me exaggerate a little bit. As of right now on the moon, I mean, nobody's going to stay there for 5 years, okay? And then that the basic science research and behind that, it takes a lot of time, okay? So we just send the graduate students and let them do while we are here enjoying our Earth life. Well, not exactly. So like you said, it's very important that we go there and then have this kind of what you call it, the base camp laboratories that could do multidisciplinary sciences. Okay. Different type of spectrometers. Okay. What you call microscopes, everything automated. Okay. And then only for probably like more what you are intense research, then we go there. Okay. Or what you call it, like a maintenance and doing different things that we cannot telescience from here. I think that will be the big push.
So I have a question for you all, also, along the lines that Padita said of a science laboratory on the moon. They are designing and testing a long-range pressurized rover for the moon that allow the astronauts to go out on longer traverses and probably stay in that vehicle as a habitat, sort of thing, like an overnight or maybe a couple of days, kind of like a big RV, right? And then come back. And right now, what a lot of their thoughts are related to that is associated with being able to collect more rock samples and then store more volatile collections and different things. What are your guys' thoughts on what you can potentially put into there from a physical sciences standpoint to do research in different locations on the moon as it relates to, say, water ice extraction and volatiles?
Kevin, that's a good question that opened the doorway to, let's take a look at the Mars rovers, the last one and the Curiosity and one that we sent. Okay, we should be doing something very close to that. Okay, and the reason, like I was explaining a few minutes ago, is that for Mars is okay. Where do we go? Okay, and so Mars is huge. Okay, so we can just fly out. Okay, buy a ticket, that sort of thing. So we have to find where the most interesting locations are, and then how do we find that is search for water on Mars. Okay, that's how we are, and the reason behind that little helicopter that we have it on Mars that we were flying is that it's not just to have this kind of, can we fly at the very thin air or different kind of air suspension system that the helicopter would fly. It's not that. The actual thing that the principal scientists and then project scientists decide to build this helicopter is the rover doesn't know where to go. Okay, and it has so many places to go. So the best thing is get a scout. So get a spy. So he would go there. Okay, it would go there, take a look at it, and then map all the terrains. Okay, and then look at how can we get there to the most important point. Okay, that would be the same thing that we're doing on Moon also. Okay, it will be much more at a grander scale because it's closer. Okay, we can get there in 2-3 days. Okay, we can have a good up mass that we can take it over there. Okay, so yeah, like you said, we should have that kind of capabilities, right? Yeah, like the one that we have it on the Mars right now, the last one that we launched, which is about the size of a small car. There are many spectrometers. Yeah, many. Yeah.
So Kevin, sorry, I did not understand the question. So what was the question exactly?
For a manned pressurized rover that can go much further, traverse distances on the moon to different areas, what type of research equipment would you want to outfit it with in order to be able to do studies that you would need to do to address water ice or other volatiles, prospecting and other analyses that you guys would want to do?
I think there needs to be a lot of different types of spectrometer. Like the Viper has quite a bit of those spectrometers, right? So that's what they were mentioning. But in addition to that, I think a very simple thing that I would propose, which is when you are trying, I was listening to this advanced manufacturing guys also, right? So they were talking about how they can use the regolith and things like those. And I just listened to some experiment a couple of days back, which I think they did it at GRC, where they tried to take the dirt and they saw like it jams up at lunar gravity, but it does not jam in microgravity or in one gravity. So some kind of like a hopper type thing, which will see how things flow and things like those. Because anytime, and the reason for doing this is the flowability of the media that you have over there. So almost like you scoop it up and you see how it is flowing. So we have to rig up some kind of a measurement device or something to measure the fluidity of the granular media, because that will be very important for processing the water ice. Sorry, water from the system. Does it make sense, Kevin?
Yeah, certainly. If that's what, the things that you guys are going to need. I mean, the idea is all this is new. And so what we're trying to do, and for also the white papers, is to collect all the ideas that are out there.
Right, because I think that will be very important to have some way of doing some rheological measurement. And if the dusty particle is there, or like granular media, somehow we have to have the way to measure how that is flowing. What do you think, Parita? Parita, you are mute if you are speaking.
I am sorry. Yeah, I certainly agree about the what your rheology part of this. Okay. Mostly is like this is getting back to the fundamental science also. Okay. Yeah. In terms of studying the rheology and so on. Okay. And then there should be kind of very good applications of okay, how do we what you call it, like get the lunar resources for continuing livability and then to continue research over there. Yeah. So there are many interesting fundamentals experiments of science and instrumentation that we could suggest. Okay. Yeah. When I look back on the instrument that they have it on Mars with the rovers, it's mostly more or less to do with the what you call rock samplings and then chemical analysis. Okay, are we limiting to that part only? Because see, the reason that we're doing the rock sampling, chemical analysis, how much percent of water is there, what is the density, it is like what and what there, and here is could be a different. Okay, we know much about it, and then we can do a lot of not only for exploration purpose but as well as for survivability, and then as well as for the fundamental sciences that we cannot do on Earth. Okay, so the other thing is that see, bear it in mind that especially, Gavin, you're a biologist, and then, the biotechnology has changed tremendously within the last decade or less. Okay. Say like, never in our life before, in my life before, I thought that we will be able to do DNA editing, and then on the even on the unborn baby. It is what you call it as surprisingly, and then even more towards like a dangerously advancing. Okay, so the technology would change, and then our need and our what you call it, our what you call decision of what type of science, what type of technology is necessary would change also. Yeah, I think that's why I was suggesting that midterm, which I see that in the decadal survey is instead of midterm 5 years, should be like every 3 years, probably. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. Also, I think what this brings up in terms of the technologies, and then you also combine it back with the gaps and the important questions, it comes back to Tyler's idea that we need to be more interdisciplinary in approach as opposed to single disciplines. Within physical sciences as well as extending out to other groups. So I think Tyler's idea of interdisciplinary science for both a fundamental and R&D is very important. At least it would seem to me, because there's so many things that we don't know, and also so many different things that are potentially going on. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, and just to add, I think some of that's come from, like, as you know, our group moved into BPS fairly recently, and just the impression I've gotten from that is that they do tend to focus on some of these, larger missions or multi-use facilities and things of that nature. So I think that's kind of the best approach moving forward as well, keeping with that theme, rather than some of the smaller experiments, which we can, do on ISS for the most part fairly easily, but when you talk about going to the moon, that's a whole different challenge. So some of these larger multi-use facilities or hardware is probably the best approach for that.
So we have Ben here. Ben, would you like to say something? If you are speaking, you are mute, Ben. Anyway, so I think, yeah, so that I think, Kevin, that is something that you and I may talk at a later time offline. So they have to see like how that can be initiated, right? But with regard to, like, if we sum it up, like, what are the key technologies and technical capabilities, to your point, that will be needed? So Tyler, can you sum it up, what we have on your side?
Yeah, let's see. So starting off, regarding question 1, if you want to click back to that, one thing I brought up is that we have a hard time. We don't really have a large facility to kind of simulate lunar gravity. Kevin mentioned some of the analogs you could use, maybe Antarctica or things like that. And we have ISS right now for micro G, but as we found, a lot of things can be different in lunar gravity. So regarding water ice, some of the larger ISRU type tools we might need are kind of hard to test right now without having that dedicated lunar facility, unless we go there. Kevin mentioned the Viper program, and some of the CLIP studies are good for allowing us to build up that technology on the moon. And then Suman, you mentioned something about how, let's see. Yeah, you mentioned about how do we build some of these teams. We do need these diverse teams with geophysics, imaging, mapping, fluids, complex fluids, and all that. And then there's more talk about that. Probably a good approach for some of these larger moon missions. And then Kevin mentioned his definition of meaningful science, which will eventually open up more doors and kind of direct us as far as what we need to research and where the gaps are once we solve those initial gaps of where's the water, how do we extract it, is there a water cycle? Once we answer some of those questions, that will open more doors to let us look at some of the more fundamental areas. And then we had a talk about if some of the initial lunar experiments will be on some of these hardware and tech demos, or if there'll be room for fundamental science from the onset. And my comment was that the tech development, it does allow for a lot of the commercial partners to get involved and draws commercial interest for going to the moon and extracting the ice or volatiles or whatever is up there. And then, yeah, we mentioned the Viper program again, which is allowing for some of that. And then Padetha mentioned that some of the big questions we'd like to answer from a fundamental science point of view are who we are, why we're here, et cetera. And those questions will never really go away. We're always trying to answer those. And then finally, on the third question about the key technology we need, several folks mentioned automation and how we can design experiments just to fit, within a single box, be remotely controlled, conduct lunar research remotely through that. And there's also work of a longer range rover for some of the lunar work. And there was a question of what could we do in that. Padetha mentioned some of the Mars rovers as analogs and how they use the helicopter demo mainly for supporting the rover, for mapping out new areas. And it's not just its own demo to say we did it. Several folks mentioned spectrometers on how useful those would be. And then, yeah, we kind of wrapped up about how that's just reinforcing that we do need this multidisciplinary approach for a lot of the lunar hardware.
Tyler, in terms of instrumentation, before I forget, on the rover and on the Mars, do we have what you call LC and GC there also? I think they have a GC there, gas chromatographer, right? Yeah.
That rings a bell. I'm not sure if they have it on this one or on the prior rover.
Yeah,
I believe it's
but for the lunar surface study, is either mobile or stationary. I think one that a lot of people would like to do is like a liquid chromatography, flame, gas chromatography. Yeah, those are very useful actually for elemental analysis, fundamental studies. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know whether we need a SEM or TEM yet, because we can bring it back to Earth, for instance, things that we need to analyze more in detail. But immediate results that we can get, it's a I don't know whether GC or gas or liquid chromatography would be.
I think chromatography is a bit difficult, Padita, but however, like things like XRD analysis and things like those, because your liquid chromatography they require like large column effluent. And
yeah, you need the liquid columns, right? Yeah.
So that's not gonna work. So I think what you need is over there is something like XRD, like X-ray diffraction ones.
But X-ray diffraction, yeah, so, EDXRF, you can do that.
So I think those are the important part. Like imaging wise, I think ACM will be too big to carry, because the challenge is you have to keep a vacuum, you have to seal everything. It's very difficult to do, like the sample prep wise. And because you know like how big even the benchtop ACM, they're like gigantic. You can do better job with like visual stuff, meaning like regular camera, regular microscope or regular lenses and things like those. So yeah, so I think that will be very important. So I know that we have like a short break, maybe after 5-10 minutes. Can we come back then?
Suman, I'm going to head over to the dust mitigation and dust discussion that's going on right now. So sure. I'm going to sign off.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks a lot.
Well, thanks everyone again for participating. Really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you.